Flower arranging from your garden is the 7th in the series of videotapes that we're making, and I think it's going to be the most exciting because it means you yourself can go outside and have a look and find the bits that we're going to be doing today. In front of me here now is a whole range of things that I've been out and picked from the gardens locally. I must say I've had to go out and raid some friends and villagers' gardens because I hadn't got all the bits that I needed in my own. But here we have some unusual bits that you might not have thought about picking before. We have raspberry cane, we have the red currant, the flowering currant, we have the actual red currant itself, which would fruit later on. We have a piece of old beech leaves that have dried, and in the hedgerows they're still sitting there after the winter. We have the spring bits from the poplar and from the lime trees. We have the beautiful sticky buds that are opening. We have the variegated laurel, because this is all year round and we can use this in the winter arrangements. And down here we have variegated holly and the ordinary holly, and the lovely red berries of the variegated laurel. I mean, they're really worth growing just for the berries. They're really beautiful. We have another laurel that has a flower on it in the springtime, and I'm going to show you how to take the leaves off, and we're just going to leave the flower heads on it. We have some cones that we've picked up. I know they look enormous, but they've actually come, well, this one came from Berkhamsted, so they're not as though they're foreign, and these ones were found in the wood fairly close to us. We have mahonia leaves, which are good for Christmas ranging and for drying. Laurustina, that's just coming into flower in the spring, and it opens up into a lovely white flower head, and it's very useful. Heathers, well, they flower all the year round. This at the moment is the lovely white heather, and the purpley red growing alongside, with the Euronymous. Now, Euronymous is really good because you can get that in the gold variety or in this nice silver one, and it is greenery all the year round, and it's very good for cutting. We have some very prickly berberis. If you're going to plant a hedge and you want to keep the burglars out, plant the berberis because it's really prickly with rows of thorns on the joints of each of the leaves. So you'll have to be very careful when you pick it because you've got to cut these off to get them into the foam when you come to arrange them. Bits of broom. That stays green all the year round, or it's nice and yellow or white or red when it flowers later on. Don't forget the herb garden, because the herbs themselves are really good for flower arranging. This is a bit of rosemary. Right. Well, my name is Barbara Cooper, and I've been a florist for quite a number of years now, which is why I have much pleasure in doing these videos for you. We hope that you find them really interesting, and it gives you the confidence to go out and to do the things yourselves. Right, to enable you to arrange, you really need the blocks of foam. This is the wet foam block, which I haven't soaked, and you can see it's a very light green colour. This one, which I've soaked, is heavy and it's dark green in colour, and it should be dark green all the way through the block. If it isn't, the flowers won't get enough moisture for them to suck up and to keep going. Right, the first arrangement I want to do is a simple one. I'm going to just use an ordinary saucer, and I'm going to put on it a lump of oasis, which I'm just going to cut. I'm using a breadboard and a very thick knife here, mainly because I can't lose it in the foliage, and also it cuts through the oasis well. That I'm just going to put onto the dish like that. Just put this out of the way. Right. Now, if you want to use the oasis foam, you might need to put it on with, this is Oasis Fix, which will keep it onto your dish, and this is the frog that you put this to. and your oasis onto it like that. But you must have a dry dish, so make sure it's dry. Then put your oasis fix to the bottom of your frog and push it into the centre of your dish. And onto that pushes your block of oasis. That out of the way. Now, to make perfectly sure it can't fall off, we usually use this, which is pot tape, and we put it over the, don't put it right in the centre, but put it over the sides like that, right underneath and around at the bottom, so that it crosses at the bottom and it sticks to itself. It doesn't like a wet dish, so you have to make sure that it's dry or that it comes over the top like that. Now, this arrangement I'm going to do first is going to be a Christmassy type of one, where you can use all your outside green leaves and berries. So we're going to use a candle. Now, you can either carve your candle with a knife, so you get a point on the end of it. Put these bits away like that. Because you don't want to use the bottom of the candle to make a great big hole, and it won't stay in either if it's round. So carve off the bottom, making sure you don't cut yourself, and you can push it into the oasis like that, where it's quite nice and firm. Or alternatively, you could use this, which is a candle holder, and you just pop your candle into the top, make sure you push it right down and into the block like that. You'll need to put it in first, because if you don't, you'll find that all your stems will be crisscrossing into the middle and you won't be able to push the candle in. So put the candle in first and everything else will follow. Right. For greenery, as we're going to do a sort of a Christmassy arrangement, then the variegated holly comes into its own here. Now, holly has an extremely awkward habit of having a lot of leaves together, and you have a job to get in between them to cut them to a smaller size. This is nice new growth that is quite well spread out. What you do is you push it into the oasis, quite a good push in, and because you've got the oasis above the height of the container, which is just this saucer, you've got a lot of depth here to be able to push into. This is the green holly, and you can see it's much more difficult to split into pieces, but if you turn it over, you'll be able to use your scissors like this and cut it into sections, and then it won't show on this side where you've made your cut. When you put it in, make sure you always cut everything on a slant, and that everything you put in, you've actually made a new cut on it, so that it will take up the water from the wet foam. This is going to be a circular arrangement, so we've got to go all the way around the bottom. Take that bottom leaf off because it's too close to the foam, like that, all the way around. If you get leaves that have got brown marks on, then you can just cut round them like a transfer and get rid of all the brown marks. Now, if your holly's got berries on it, then obviously you don't need to worry about finding berries, but at the moment the birds have taken all the holly berries off, so I'm going to use the red berries of the variegated laurel. I think they're absolutely beautiful, and they fall nicely in groups. They're such a lovely, vibrant red colour. There we go, like that. Right. There's some bits of laurel. This is the non-variegated laurel, and it has nice narrow leaves. It's one of the varieties that are better on a rockery or in a small flower bed because it doesn't get too large, especially if you're going to be good flower arrangers and keep hacking it down all the time. Don't put your foliage too upright near your candle, because if you do, you'll find that when the candle burns down, that it might catch the foliage that's around it, and you don't want to set the place on fire. Now the Euronymous is all year round, so you're going to find it in the winter time as well as the spring or summer. And it comes in the yellow or this silver variety. It makes good ground cover as well, so if you've got a patch that you want to put some shrubby bits in that you don't want to get too tall, then this is a very good one to put in. The idea being that it covers up the dish, and you've got the nice berries to show for your Christmas arrangementy bits. I mean, even into spring you'll find there's quite a lot of berries in the garden if you actually go and look, right through almost till the end of April of big red berries, and the holly actually has some of its berries on almost right through till May sometimes before the birds have got at it. And then of course it starts flowering, and the green berries appear later on in the summer, and if you look very closely you'll see them already on your tree ready for Christmas time. This is rosemary. Obviously it's a herb, but it's also a lovely aromatic leaf to use in your arranging. You want different heights, so you can have a spiky bit or a flat leaf, and it gives you lights and depths as you go round. Little bits of silver. I'm going to show you also how to wire up some of these cones, because you can use cones in your arrangements and they're not going to cost you anything, because if you have a fir tree in your garden you're going to find that you've got cones underneath those. This obviously is the giant variety, and this one I picked up in Berkhamsted off a very tall pine which is really beautiful. It's a very long cone and it smells beautiful when it gets warm. Whoops. Now, to wire up cones, you're going to need wires, and they come in different sizes and in different widths and lengths. So, for a big cone, you're going to need a very stiff wire. Now, you can get the brown stub wires, and they're very good, but they tend to rust. So if you can get hold of the green coated wires, which are slightly more expensive, but they don't rust. And if you're actually getting our starter kit, you'll find that you'll get some of those in them anyway. So I'll just show you that again, because I wasn't saying to you what I was about to do. It's because I'm used to doing them. The idea is that you take a thick wire and you find where the petals are open. Now, if you've only just picked them up and it's a cold, damp day, you're going to find that they're very tight. But if you leave them by the fire or in a warm room, you'll find that they'll open as this one has. So you can just push the wire between the petals and then twist it. I always twist the cone and keep the wires steady, but that's entirely up to you. Just make a twist at the end of the wire so they're together, and you'll have your cone wired up. If it's a smaller cone, you do exactly the same thing, but then it does tend to be a bit tighter at the bottom, so you have to take the shorter end and then wriggle it through in between these nodules like this. Twist the cone, slowly bringing your fingers back so the wire's twisted together like that. And then you can go on and you can make a whole line of cones if you want to by joining 2 or 3 together. Like that, and then you can twist these wires together as you go. And you can cut them off. If you've got these proper floristry scissors, they have a groove here, which means you're quite happy and able to cut wires without damaging any scissors, but it is advisable to get either secateurs or proper scissors, otherwise you'll be ruining your kitchen ones. And then you can just push them into the centre of your arrangement like that. And if you have a whole group, you can bring them out on different sizes on either side. If you want to be nice for Christmas, would be to silver these. You can get either a silver spray paint from your car dealer and spray them silver, or you can buy the proper silver paint from your florist or from a local hardware. And if you want to, you could drop little bits of glitter onto there and make them all glistening. But car paint does just as well, but do make sure you spray them in an open position, either out in the garden on a still day or in a greenhouse or somewhere where the windows can be well opened. Right, just see if there's any more gaps, just fill those in. You shouldn't be able to see the oasis between the branches. But at Christmas time, you're not going to have that many flowers in the garden. You might be lucky enough to have the Christmas rose. If you have, then obviously you'll be able to pop those in there. But as you see, if I turn it round, it has bits all the way around. And if you want to, you could put a nice wooden base underneath there, and that would be a good table centre for Christmas. This is one of my favourite pieces of wood which we use for flower arranging. I'm afraid I've used it in several of the videos, so if you've actually got the unusual container video and you've seen it in that, then please forgive me, but it's one of my favourite pieces. It's nice because it has nooky bits in here and on up here where you can put the oasis. It's very natural. You don't have to have a container to put the oasis in. You can put it straight onto the piece of wood. So I'm just going to cut a piece up and put it on here. Just wedge it in wherever you can get it. If that bit is a bit big, to put it in here like that. I have to clear the decks, otherwise I get a bit cluttered up. Move it over into the front. This is another one of the videos that the arrangements that I'm going to do with just greenery, because it's good for winter for you if you haven't got any flowers in the garden. So I'm going to use as a background laurel. Make sure you haven't got it too close to the oasis, and again, as I said before, cut it on a slant. This arrangement would look super in a big fireplace or on a corner of the room on a pedestal, or in a bay window even. Because it's not actually on a dish, the oasis will dry out fairly quickly, so you have to make sure that you drip a bit of water into it every day. Right, this piece here is of the laurel, and if you've noticed, I've actually taken off the leaves and I've left the little flower heads. So all you need to do is to take your leaves off and leave your stem like this. bits, cut them off. And this is an interesting thing to do with lime. Lime has lovely sort of dangly flower heads on them. And in the late spring, you can cut the limes, or the early summer, and cut the limes, and you strip it off like this, so you just have the flowers showing. Right, to fill in the background from that, I'm going to put a piece of yew. Yew is usually associated with churchyards, but if you've got them in the garden, do use them because the foliage has a lovely dark green colour and it's very good for winter flower arranging. This tends to be an enormous arrangement, so you need plenty of space for it when it's finished. A piece of broom. Broom is quite nice because you can bend it in the direction you want it to go in. This is a piece of hebe. We used the silver variety in the last arrangement. This is the one which will flower with a blue flower later on in the summer. Sometimes they are a bit susceptible to frost, so you have to watch it if you're in a frost pocket if you've planted your hebes there. Although we're fairly north, this actual plant is growing in quite a sheltered position. If you've got some laurels which are growing, if I bring this down here, you might be able to see that it has some root systems already starting at the bottom here. This is where it's grown down and the roots are just touching the soil. So if you cut it off there and put it into some rooting medium, peat or other soft soil, then this will root and you'll have another plant. There's a lovely spray here of the red berries from the laurel, which I'm going to put in down in the front here, as it looks really lush. And some more red berries to fill in up here. This is a bit prickly as well. The name escapes me for the moment, but it will be in your listing of your plant that you'll need for each arrangement. I can't remember the name offhand. This is the other Euronymous, the yellow variety, the golden one. This one has grown up quite tall, so I've taken off the tall bits to use as a background for here. So I've got the nice red and the gold coming in together. Cutting off the bad bits off the leaves, so cutting it back so it doesn't look too unsightly. It's a bit long. This is the variegated holly. I'm sure you know that you've got to have both the male and the female varieties of holly for you to get the berries. So if you've got a holly bush in your garden that is not berrying, you've either got the male or you've got a very lonely female. The berberis is what you have to be very careful of at the bottom, to take off your rows of nasty little thorns. And in the spring they look lovely because they have big pendants of flowers hanging, which are really pretty in the arrangements. And don't forget ivy. Ivy is lovely trailer and it's wonderful for filling in, and it makes it look as though it's part of a woodland scene. So if your neighbour's got some ivy they're cutting back off a tree, then zip out and rescue some because it's well worth collecting. Just a piece at the back here. And a bit of height for here. So we've got a bit on one level. So we've got the height coming down and through and out the front. If you haven't got any yew, then you could use the Leylandi, because that's such a good grower, and you can put a bush in and you can start cutting it within a few years because it grows so quickly, and your friends and neighbours are bound to be cutting theirs down because they've got too tall anyway. So with just a bit of greenery, and I can't see if there are any holes anywhere, bearing in mind I'm working back to front. If there's a hole at the front, please excuse me because I can't see it from back here. So there you are, an arrangement for a fireplace or a big bay window, or if we're lucky enough to have a ginormous table, a table arrangement. Because the rockeries tend to get left out, this little vase here is absolutely brilliant for putting primroses and other small flowers into. So don't forget your rockery when you're going outside to have a look in your garden. You'll be amazed what's actually there. For instance, we found some little pansies. Now, as a rule, pansies are very difficult to arrange because their heads flop over. But in this kind of a vase, you can lay them on the top and they look really pretty, and their face is shot beautifully. Don't forget to cut them at the bottom as you put everything in. Put the water in here first and then just fill in with your flowers. These are, I always call them wanders, but they're some of the primrose family, the polyanthus, which is a nice bright pink. Pop those in. Polyanthus and primroses last very well in water, but you just don't think of cutting them as a rule because they're so short. This is the head of an anemone. This anemone is flowering in a really sunny place just under one of the windows, so it's not got beaten down by the snow. Just like that. This is Palmyra, and it has either pink or pink and blue flowers on the top of its stem. They're beautiful. They're nice and dark blue, these ones. Makes a nice change. So you can alternate the colours as you go round. This is a spring arrangement, and you'll be actually amazed. This is periwinkle. They flower from the spring through to the summer, and you can get a variegated variety of this as well. This is the head of one of the candelabra primulas. There's two different colours in those that we have here. This is the lighter and then the darker purple. But again, these just pop into this dish really easily. And because they're not in any type of foam, they can take the water straight up and not feel that they've got to struggle to draw the water. Some little grape hyacinths give you a different shape. A forget-me-not. The forget-me-nots grow like weeds. Once you've got them, they'll go all over the garden, but don't forget to cut them because they're very good in water and they look really pretty on a kitchen windowsill or in something like this. If you group the flowers together so you get a group of one type, then they tend to show up a bit better. We've even found some coltsfoot. I mean, it's such a strong plant, it's even pushing the tarmac up and coming through. Being a herb, it's one of the old-fashioned things. People used to smoke the leaves, make them into tobacco and smoke it, though I think it must have been really smelly. But these are one of the first things that flower in the spring, along with the celandines. So make a nice group of those. Because they're a bit like a dandelion, they do tend to close up if it's very dark or at night, so don't be surprised if they've shut up when you've gone to bed. This one's already shut up, it thinks it's night time. And in with that we've got a bit of white heather. That finishes the end of there. So I've got yellows going right way through. some nice pink heather to pop in between. And the saxifrages are out. They're the ones that grow like a moss over your rockery. And there's a reddy one, a pinky one and a white one. They have really good stems for flower arranging if you bother to look at them. And they'll sit in there beautifully. Or these will go into oasis very well indeed if you're going to do miniature flower arranging. This is an Aquilegia leaf. Nice to have a bit of greenery in with your flowers. Or even perhaps the leaf of the little wanda. Put it in there like that. There's another little pansy to finish that end up there. The Laurustina flowers are quite pretty as well. These are the ones that are just opening. They've got the pink background with the white centres. If I pop that behind the periwinkles, it'll show up like that. A bit of palm. We've cut some of the palm, the pussy willow, which is just coming into flower with its pollen stamens all out. Have to mind that they don't drop their yellow pollen over your table though. That's the only thing with these when they're full of pollen. A couple more little wandas just to pop in there like that before they die. Whoops. These aren't very good for putting in oasis at all because they're too thin a stem and you'd have to wire them up, and they're very thin. Little one to pop in there. There, so you've got a nice little arrangement to go round. You can put a candle in there if you wanted to, if you've got a dinner party. Don't forget to spray the things because, like all flowers and foliage, they need to be sprayed once they're indoors because they evaporate a lot of water from their surfaces and they need to be kept damp. It helps to keep them lasting a bit longer. So if you've got a dinner party and you haven't got any oasis or foam and you've got a dish, then just pop out and cut some of your heads off and pop them in. Baskets are the most popular kind of container really, especially if you've been given one for a birthday or for Christmas before. Now you can resurrect them and take them out and use them. This one doesn't have a liner. Some of them have a liner, which is handy because you don't need to dish then. But do check to make sure there are no pinholes in it that's going to let your water out at the bottom all over your table. So in order to keep your dish onto your basket, you're going to need your fix. And I have a piece here just to pop in at the bottom. Squidge that on there and put your dish on. Press it well on like that. Then you're going to need another bit of fix on the bottom of your frog to press into your dish like that. And onto that then we'll fix your lump of oasis like that. Now if you want to make quite sure that that's going to stay on, you can run a wire between the weaves of your basket outside, that side, and bring it back through all around the handle even, if that's more convenient. This is a very soft basket, so it tends to give a bit, so I think it's as wise to pull it in with a wire so it makes it a bit stiffer. You don't want your dish falling off if you're going to give it to somebody. Right, now if you're going to give it as a present, then it's quite a nice idea to learn how to put your ribbon onto your handle. And it's not difficult. We use this ribbon in the business, and it's polyester ribbon, and it strips to any width that you like, which is handy, because you don't always want it as wide as that. So for a ribbon to go on here, we only need just short of half the width of the ribbon, and we're going to make a bow and tie it off. That's the piece we're going to use for the actual bow, and this is our tying off piece. Don't need it very wide. We'll split it down again. You take your ribbon and you make a little bow at that end, and you bring it back and you make another bow. So you've got two with a little bit at this end, and another one, and another one. Don't worry about cutting that off for the moment because you're going to be able to strip that bit. And you take your piece of thinner ribbon and you wind it round a couple of times so it's nice and firm and holding your bow together, and you turn it over and tie it in a knot. This is avoiding you using any wires. You could wire it on if you wanted to, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. So this is going to be your bit that you tie onto your basket, and we're going to make some more streamers from that bit. So bring your handle here and bring your ribbon around a couple of times so it's tied your bow to there. You can knot it in the front if you want to, because you're going to streamer the ribbon so it won't show anyway if it's a good knot. And we'll take another couple so that it makes a nice dangly bit for the middle. Just tie another one into the middle of there. And another one like that. You can get them any width you like, but sometimes this ribbon doesn't strip very straight, so if you're starting it from the bottom and it goes off course, it's really annoying. So I usually start mine in the middle and then it runs both ways without going too short or too narrow. Oops. If you pull it too tight, it will snap if it's very narrow. Right. With these ends then, you can pull and they'll twist right up. And the turning motion is between your thumb and the level of the scissors. So you pull and the ribbon twists up. The harder you pull, the tighter the curl. If you're interested to learn about different ways of wiring up leaves and other things, then you'll need the Flowers for Your Wedding video, in which I go into great detail there about all the different types of wiring up different leaves, etc. in that. And these bits that you've had dangling down here, you can again strip down and turn in. Like that. If you overstrip it and it goes into a too tight a curl, then if you run it on the other side, it'll make it straight again. So just curl them in like that. There we are, nice dangly bow for you. And if you want one to go at the front, we can cut that in half because it's a bit long. And we can join these together like that. And we take a thin wire. This is a thin green wire, or you could use silver wire if you want to, and you make a hairpin like that so that you've got the ribbon lying next to the two bits of wire, one of which is longer. And you take the longer one and twist it over the ribbon and the short piece of wire that you have there. And then you can strip those down like that. As I said, if they're too tight, run it the other way and it'll straighten it out for you. So this we're going to use, push it into the centre there like that to dangle over. If you want to make another type of bow, then we do one which you can actually put into the basket, into the oasis itself, and you can use these as fillers. If you haven't got enough flowers, you can make a foliage arrangement and then just do these bows to add to it. They're quite simple. I'll show you again. That's your 3 bows together, and the wire catches around the top of your fingers and includes the bottom of the bow. Show you again. Right, You don't need a streamer this time, so you bow and squeeze in between your two fingers on this hand. I'm right-handed, so if you're left-handed you have a problem because you have to turn it all around. One bow, two bows, three, and you can do 2, 3, 4, however many you like. This is going to be a 4, and I can streamer that one if I want to. In fact, I'll cut it off because I've shown you already how to do that. And you take your wire, I'll use a thicker one so you can see it better. Right, you hold the ribbon between these two fingers still, and you take, beg your pardon, you take this round the top of here so that you've got your fingers holding this still, not moving, and this has come round the top of your fingers and it's looped around the back like that a couple of times just to hold it. So it's loop, loop, loop. Put the wire down between your thumb and that finger, so you have this bit of short wire is this way, holding on to both the wire and the ribbon. You turn with the other hand that around a couple of times so that it's like that. Catch it at the back, and you have your bow on the wire, and you can make a whole group of them. In fact, if you want to, you can make a ball of ribbon like that and hang it up as a decoration. We're going to use those in a minute when we've done our arrangement. So let's take our basket and go back to the beginning. Right. To do the basket we need to come out on both sides because it's got a high handle, and we're going to come out this side and slightly at the back of here. You can make any shape you really want to, it's up to you and your space that you actually have available to put it onto when you've done it. These are bits of red currant, which as you can see will be flowering, and then they will have the berries that you can eat later on, but this is the old wood and it's too gangly, so I've cut it back. So these go at the far corners, like that. You want to be about equal distance on either side of your handle. Some little bits of, this is the Leylandii, the slightly yellow variety, because it's nice colouring. If you've got a hedge of the green one, then a couple of the yellow varieties makes a bit of a change for your vista. Again, bit of the, you can see how long my bits of currant were. They were getting totally out of control. So this is going to be my point up the back here, and you want it to get in right at the far corner of here from your front, so you've got your back and then you've got all this front bit to use for your flowers. These are some bits of raspberry cane. I know that you'd say it's sacrilege to cut the raspberries off, but these were so high, they were about 10 feet high, and I didn't really want them up as high as that, so these are the tops. So I've cut those off, and again they last extremely well in water. In the spring you'll find that the red currant is beautiful. It comes out the same time as the forsythia. It does have this unfortunate smell with it that if you don't mind it, it's fine, but if you think there's a load of cats in the house, then don't use it because it is a bit smelly. Has a distinctive smell of cats, I'm afraid. But it's very pretty, and if you don't mind the smell, then it's really nice to use. Just everything gets tangled up. This is the buds that we're going to use. These are the dangly bits from the lime trees, which haven't yet sprouted any more than just this bud. In fact, these things look just pretty, just brought in and put into a vase on their own, because they open up and you get the nice new greenery as they open. as you do when you pick your sticky buds from your chestnut trees, the horse chestnut. These are just opening. Whoops. Unfortunately, they usually have quite a thick stem on them, so you have to be a bit careful if you haven't got too much space to use them in. And they're also quite sticky, and they stick to your fingers as you try to put them in as well. You have to use them when they're fairly small, because otherwise the leaves get really too big and they flop all over the place. This is a bit of elderberry. Again, it's another one of these smelly foliages. It lasts for a short time in water. It doesn't really like the oasis too much, but if you're only going to use this for a dinner party or for an arrangement that's only going to last a few hours, then it's fine. Bit of Hebe for the front. Some nice bits of blossom. In the springtime you get the nice blossoms coming out, and they look really pretty if you use them. You've got the peaches and the plums and the nice, I can't think now, the nice pink blossoms of the peach trees. And the prunuses, they're the first ones to come out, the prunuses. You want to get them before the winds attack them though, otherwise they shatter so quickly. Well, around the same time as you've got your horse chestnut coming out, you'll probably have got your tulips coming out alongside your daffodils. Well, the daffodils we have to keep separately, so we like to keep the colour schemes fairly together. So these are all going to be pinks and mauves. So we've got the nice tulips here. Now these tulips, you can actually peel back the petals like this, and you can make them look almost like a lily. You can't do this with all the tulips. Some of the varieties don't like having their petals pulled back, and they won't stay there. They just pop straight back again and will look like a normal tulip. But they look totally different, and if you've got people coming, they might not recognise this as a tulip and ask you what on earth it can be. So pop that at the back because it's the taller of them. The trouble with tulips is that they tend to grow out of all proportion. They sort of bend in lovely directions all of their own. Take off the leaves because they take away the moisture, and they'll last much better without too many leaves. If you want to, you could put a wire up them just between the head here and then just twist it round. It does stop it from tanking off too much on its own tack, which is a nuisance if you've got a formal arrangement that you're doing. The tulip you always think comes from Holland, but in fact they come from Turkey, where they were found thousands of years ago, and only relatively recently were introduced by a trader to Holland, who took up and have now developed all these lovely varieties. Right, that's that side. On this side I'm going to use the candelabra primulas, which are out now. There are 2 or 3 different colours. There's a white one, this pale purple and a dark purple one. But they're lovely for cutting. Super as a house flower if you're just going to put them in a jar. But if you want to arrange them, they've got lovely stems for pushing in, no problem at all. Sometimes they go in just as easy. Sometimes you find you've got a blockage and you have to try and find a way around the stem that's blocking where you want to put it. But because I'm doing it towards you, I can't see very well what I'm doing in the front. So sometimes I tend to get a bit of a gap, which I can't see. A heather's lovely as well. It takes quite a long time to grow, and at the moment this particular pinky purple variety is out, and also the white. So they're well worth planting, especially if you've got your peaty type of soil. being sort of West Yorkshire, we have the moors, so the heather grows really well around this area, as do the rhododendrons later on. Just filling in this side here, because if people come and see the back of an arrangement, they'll know what you've been doing. So don't forget to fill in the backs of an arrangement if people are going to be both sides of it. This is the blue Palmaria, or Palmaria, which is rather a nice flower. It's got a nice bell shape to it. And it's also a sort of a bedding plant, so the permanentness of it, you can use it as soon as it comes out, and then you've got some unusual leaves for later on in the year. The leaves go a bit soft though when you pick them, so you can't keep them out of water for very long. Mid to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We always tend to use 5s or 7s or 3s in arranging, so when you do your tulips you want to try and pick them in that type of amount. If you want to, you could put your bows in there. Personally, if it's a flower arrangement from the garden, I'm not too keen, so I'm just going to push my bow into the centre there. See if there's any more gaps. There's a bit of a gap up here, so I'm going to put this bit of May in here, the hawthorn. Again, this is a prickly type of bush when you find it in all the hedgerows, but do be careful because it has some really vicious thorns on it if you go to pick it and you don't know. Right, there's a bit of nice bit of curry plant to come out at the front here, which is the grey goes beautifully with the purple colour of the primula. So the nice bit of grey, this one's decided to go in a peculiar direction. That's better. So I've tended to group them. This side's got all the tulips, and this side's got all the Palmaria and the candelabra primula in it. Just gives you a different type of arrangement. You could make the whole thing intermingle, but as long as you've got some in and some out and it trails over the edge nicely and it's not too stiff, then that's the essence of natural flower arranging. For the spring arrangement, we're going to use the daffodils, and I've already got my lump of Oasis parked on here to start off with. I'm just going to tape it on to here, like this. I'm just going to rest it on this piece of cork bark because it makes a nice base underneath here for an arrangement, especially a yellowy type of arrangement. Right, for daffodils we have a problem because they give off this sap at the bottom when you cut them, or when you recut them when you've bought them from a shop, which means that they poison other flowers. This is particularly true of tulips. They don't like having daffodils put in with them at all. Now, to get over that, all you need to do is to cut them and then stand them in a bucket of water for a couple of hours until the sap has come out. Once it's stopped bleeding, then it's perfectly all right. But we're not going to use anything else in this arrangement, so the daffodils are going to be fine anyway. The other problem with them is that they tend to bend at the neck here, which is always not necessarily where you want to put them, and the head won't go in the right place. So what we do is poke a wire up between the two stems. Now, it's hollow all the way up here, and you can push your wire all the way up and you'll find it stopping where this joint is here, and it gets very thin in this bit here, so you have to be really careful. And if you straighten the neck out so it's not got a kink between your thumb and your first finger, you can just push the wire through and into the head proper. It doesn't actually hurt the plant in the lasting qualities. It will last just as long whether it has a wire or not, but I would use the green coated ones because they don't rust and it doesn't make a nasty mess of your plant when you your head when you take it out. So you need to wire up several of these. It doesn't matter because you can cut them any length you want, obviously with these scissors. So we'll start off and get the foliage in first. Right, a nice bit of broom for the back because it has a lovely sweep to it. A bit of golden Euonymus coming out there. And for the front bit, we're going to use some of this really prickly berberis. Nobody better be walking around with bare feet after this, otherwise they'll be getting thorns in their feet. Right, that bit's down there. Whoops. Well, I think this is worse than the hawthorn. Palm is beautiful. I love palm and using it in different arrangements. Now this is going to be a bit tall for this, so I'm just going to cut off that top bit and push this in at the back between those two. These are only general ideas that I'm giving you. You don't have to follow them step by step. It's a general idea of what you can do with things that you don't actually have to go and buy anywhere. The main thing is that you actually enjoy doing them. And if you've enjoyed doing them, then whatever you think they look like, they're going to look absolutely fantastic. Bit of blossom at the front here. Forsythia is absolutely wonderful for flower arranging, whether it's in flower or whether you're just going to use the foliage later on in the year. Because it's flowers without any leaves on in the spring, then you get the branches with the leaves on later on, which are really good for filling in and for using in your arrangements. So Forsythia is a good quick bush to put in to grow for both spring arranging and for summer arranging. The only trouble is that if you have a lot of high winds when the flowers are out, they get what we call wind burn, brown marks on the petals. And unfortunately, we've had some really bad snowstorms and winds up here, and they've caught the Forsythia on the windward side. Right, this one is nice and stiff, so I don't need to wire this one up, and it's a bud, so we'll pop that in at the top. And the buds, as you know, you must have them fully out of their calyx here, otherwise they get stuck and they go all mouldy. So if you get one that doesn't look as it's coming out, you just want to tease the end off the top so that it allows the yellow bud to come out properly. Sometimes if you buy them early in the year, because we as florists actually have them in the flower shops from November onwards, but the ones that are out in the gardens don't tend to come out until sort of February, March time, so they've usually got no problems trying to get out from their calyx. If you're lucky enough to live down in the Scilly Isles, of course you have your wonderful Sol d'Or and Paperwhite very early in the season, and they're wonderful to put into arrangements and they have this lovely smell. So if you are going to buy any bulbs, then buy some narcissus as well as the daffodils, because they have such a wonderful smell. It's amazing, you don't think about smelling flowers, but even the yellow pansies, if you bother to smell a yellow pansy, they're absolutely wonderful and you'll get really hooked on the smell, at least I do. And it's lovely, it's nearly as good as the primrose smell. You'll need to get your daffodils in before you get your rest of your foliage, because they take up a lot of space. Because they have such thick stems, so if you get too much actually in your oasis block, you'll find that you have a lot of trouble getting the stems to go in without splaying out or breaking. If you're a nurse and you're used to giving injections, I think you'll find the wiring up a daffodil is quite easy. It's a bit long. So the only trouble is that sometimes the daffodils are longer than the wires. Right, this is Mahonia. We've had the leaves in the winter time and now the flowers are here, but they look a bit silly because they're stuck in between the leaves. So if we just take some of the leaves off so the flowers can be seen. Also it's the leaves that are prickly, so it's quite a help not to have too many prickly things in one arrangement. A nice bit of heather to fill in at the background and into the middle. The heather, as we said before, is a wonderful infiller, but do be careful you don't take too much off your bush at one go. Just put that into the middle like that, so it's coming out between the daffodils. Yellow and white is the Easter colour, so this would make a nice arrangement to go perhaps in church on your porch, or in your porch, or perhaps on the font. Let's move this over this way a bit. On this side I'm going to put a bit of this dried leafed beech. It isn't dead, it's just the fact that the leaves haven't shed yet from the autumn, so the branch will soon be bringing out its new growth, but these leaves in the meanwhile are still stuck on it. But they make a nice contrast to your yellows going through to the browns. And this is a bit of privet. Privet is another good plant to put in your garden. This is the golden variety. Some of them get almost totally pure gold leaves on them. Whoops. Come on, I know there's a space there for you. That's it. Bit of Mahonia on this side. Take off the worst of the prickles. Right, now, I don't quite know if there's any gaps at the front yet. So, if not, then I think we're more or less finished the spring section. Because spring incorporates both Mother's Day and Easter, depending on how early or late it is in the calendar, then this is a good arrangement if you're going to have children. You can put some Easter eggs on the block here or on your sideboard alongside the arrangement, or you could pop some little rabbits in here to make it a sort of Easter arrangement. Don't be frightened of using ornaments, because ornaments with the flowers around them is quite a nice way of using both the ornaments and the flowers, and you can get them out and give them a good dust that way. Well, it's summertime now, mid-July, and I have some of the flowers that I picked from the garden yesterday already here. It's a nice time of year because you've got all the summer flowers, you've got the beginning of the bedding plants coming on now, so that you'll be able to pick things like geraniums and your petunias and all the other bits later on. I'm going to start off the summer bit with a blue arrangement with the irises, because they're beautiful at this time of year. But they don't last very long, so if we use them now, in another week or so they'll have finished. So let's get on with using those. I've got a big glass vase which has a roundy bottom in here, which makes it very slippery for the oasis to stay onto. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just take an ordinary dinner plate and just pop that on the top of here. Luckily it just fits, and a block of foam. I'm not going to bother to attach it. If you wanted to, you could put your tape around if you don't feel it's very secure, but it's quite a big chunk, and because I'm working back to front, it's not actually going to move a lot. At least I hope it won't. The berberis is growing well, and these are the new shoots of the berberis. It has beautiful colours, almost flecking to pink in places, the new growth. It's also very prickly, so it makes a brilliant hedge if you don't want the burglars to get through. They get stuck on the spikes on those. So I'm just going to bring this out at the front. I'm going to do a trailing arrangement, a bit like a miniature pedestal. If you can imagine this in a larger version for a church, say, then this is the design that you'd need to follow perhaps. We have some iris leaves. These were off the yellow irises, and they're a bit taller, the water iris. Now they do tend to bend a bit, like that one has there, so I'm going to cut that off a bit shorter. Push this at the back. It has to go in a straight line, and you have to push it in fairly gently. This type of leaf is rather fun because it's a different shape, and therefore you get a very almost modern arrangement design with this type of leaf. Let's get the other bits in. This is eucalyptus. We have a eucalyptus tree in the garden which is brilliant, except we've planted it too close to the house, and as it grows at an astronomical rate a year, I'm now going to have to dig it up and move it because it's already grown about 4 feet from last year from the pieces I cut off from arranging from last summer. Larkspur and delphinium, the same type of family. They're beautiful, and the only thing you have to watch is the slugs in the summer because they love getting into the bottom shoots of these and eating them off. But if you can grow the delphinium and you can grow the larkspur, they're well worth the trouble. And of course you can also dry them, especially the larkspur. That is one of the common ones that you could buy dried. Because the larkspur's a lot thinner, we're going to push this in at the top. And also it has very good buds for putting in at the side, so you don't waste anything off the larkspur. And you could, if you wanted to, use the greenery, I suppose. Helps to fill in at the back. It's a nice fluffy greenery. Let's pop these in at the front in a line. Things tend to look better if you can either group them or put them into lines like that. Some of the other foliage we've got, these are hosta leaves. Hostas also suffer very badly from snail or slug damage, and as you can see they've had a good time chunking off the sides there. It's very difficult to get a perfect leaf unless you're very heavily slug pelleted. But if you can get them to grow in a shady place, they're well worth the trouble, and they're the leaves that the flower rangers like the best. This is a variegated variety. You can get some really huge hostas. I find them a bit too big in actual fact, though, the very big ones, unless you're doing enormous arrangements. It would be all right for big churches. This is the new growth from the purple nut tree. It has beautiful hazelnuts. It's a hazelnut, but it happens to be the purple variety. Again, well worth planting if you've got a big space for it, because it does get fairly large fairly quickly. During the late summer, these bronzy leaves turn to a fairly green, ordinary green leaf, but during the new growth season and in the spring, you have this wonderful coppery colour. Canterbury bells, or campanula. These are the campanula ones, a slightly thinner version, and they're very good for your points, and they're also very good for growing. They do need staking because they have a tendency to get knocked over by the rain if you're not careful, and you'll get some interesting shapes then because they tend to bend along the ground, and you'll get a bent stem which has the flowers all turned up on the top. Right, this delphinium is absolutely huge, so I'm going to have to cut it down. You can use the actual flower florets on their own if you're doing a small arrangement. Each one has a fairly long stem on it, as you can see there, and you could use these in bridesmaids' headdresses or a small arrangement where you don't need very much stem. We use them quite a lot in wedding work because some of these ones at the bottom here have got a beautiful long stem, and they last quite well if they're cut short because the water hasn't got to travel up such a vast distance to get to the flower itself, so it keeps going well. Whoops. It's such a big thing that I don't want too much of this. I have to be careful that I keep some weight at the back here because otherwise it might tip over. Let's put the iris in next. It's a bit too tall. Because they're the fairly dominant colour along with the delphinium, I'm putting them in at the bottom close in. I'm just going to weigh this back bit here with some of the stem from here because it's a bit heavy. So the only thing you have to watch with a pedestal is that you don't get too much weight at the front. If you do, then you'll have to weigh the back with something a bit heavier. Push those in there, that's better. Take that off. Right, what have we got on this side? Big gap. At this time of year, the ferns are making great strides. If you live down in Cornwall, you'll have some lovely leather-like fern that you can actually get from your florist quite easily. It's very difficult to keep these looking nice and green. They don't like being in the house after about a day or so, so this arrangement, if you want to use the fern in it, really needs to be done on the day that you actually need it doing for. If not, then you have to spray these quite a lot. They like to be fairly damp, and if it's very dry or if it's in a sunny place, they shrivel up quite quickly. Just making a group on this side. I think the most sought after flower for the summertime is the sweet pea. It's such a wonderful scent, and if you're a good gardener and you've got lovely long stems, then you're very lucky. Mine always tend to end up very short stemmed. I'm afraid I've nicked these from a friend's garden because they've grown them properly. You could also get these quite easily from your florist at this time of year. And if they're nice and fresh, they will last quite a long time. Let's see what I've got in the front. Let me just turn it around a minute to see how many gaps I've got. Ooh, look, massive gap in the front there. Just put a few of these spiky blue in the back. On this side, bring them through here. These trail nicely for coming out at the side with a spiky appearance. I'm going to pop a white rose in the centre there. Usually white is the colour that you want to the outside, but because it's totally opposite to the flowers that I'm actually using, I'm just going to pop that in the middle. Oops. That one's too big, so I'm going to reject that. These are the seed heads of the yellow iris, which they've finished now. They go over very quickly, but the blue ones that we've had here, they will also make a seed head like this, and they're very good for drying. make an interesting feature in a dried arrangement. Stay there. Right, let me just see if I can fill in the gap in the middle. I think I've got, what have I got here? A bit of larkspur. It's because this leaf is not turned itself, that's better. You don't want to see any of the foam if you can avoid it. So, because it's a pedestal arrangement, and if somebody's at the front here, they can see up into it. So you've got to make sure you've got the sides and the top filled in properly. Let me just swing this round a bit now. Oh, it's not too bad. These are the poppy seed heads. They're very dominant, have a lovely black top and the green pod, because they've only just had the poppy petals fall, so they're quite fresh. This is another one that is good for drying. And if you're interested in the techniques and how to dry flowers, then the video on that subject is out, and it shows you how to dry and how to arrange this type of pod. If you haven't got it, then I would just suggest, if you are going to dry this type of pod off, when you hang it upside down, hang it somewhere where you're not going to mind all the little poppy seeds falling out, because once they dry, they open up and then all the seeds fall out and you get a shower of poppy seeds everywhere. So you just want to sweep them up and put them back in the garden for it to continue. Just put this down here. This is the wild geranium. It's just on its last legs at the moment. There are very few of the blue flowers left on it now. The bees have had their pollen. They've been absolutely buzzing in the bush with this. But the seed heads have got a nice green calyx with a little bit in the middle, which look quite pretty. Right, let's see how that looks. I don't think we need any more, unless I've got a long one at the top here that might show up a bit better. If there's no gaps, then I think that is finished. Now, it's quite good because I can put the water onto the plate at the back here, and it's going to stand, say, on a sideboard, or it could go in a church window or somewhere where you've got nobody looking at it from the back. Because it's a garden video, this one, the things that you could make from the wood that's around in the garden is something like this. This is a bike, and all it is literally small pieces of wood that have been nailed together. This is a piece of willow or a piece of honeysuckle that's been, when it was green, it's been bound round so it forms a wheel. And then there are little bits of hazel that have been cut, and there's 2 nails in each part, so you've got a bicycle shape. I have to confess I haven't made this. I actually bought it, but having looked at it, I don't think anybody would have any problems if they've got any arty bent in them, and you've got a handy husband. I'm sure he'll be able to make you one. The thing I liked about it was when I saw it was I thought, right, that's good-o. I've got a nice bit here for a piece of foam and a nice piece at the back here that I thought looked rather fun. Again, if you wanted to, you could always make a container here, or you could tie it on. I'm not going to be bothered because I'm going to be able to lift it off when I've finished anyway, so it won't hurt. I don't think it shouldn't fall off. This is the lime tree. It's just coming into flower now, and what I've done is I've taken off the lime leaves because they're usually a bit grotty anyway, and you get all sorts of green fly and things in there as well. So I've been taking them off. and throwing those away because they're not any good. So you get left with your sepal and your little flower. It hasn't opened yet. A bit later on, probably the end of June, these will be open. And don't forget, they're really good for tea. So if you infuse these, it makes a very good drink. And I think it's a very relaxing drink as well. Right, what have we got? We've got little bits of variegated ivy, just to trail down. This is a bit akin to our woody arrangement earlier in the spring bit of the gardening tape. Obviously, I can't do all the tape in one go because the seasons are coming and going. So this is the bit now with all the beautiful summer flowers out. Also, this is handy because you can put your bits through the gap in the pretend basket at the front here. Actually, I think I'll have it this side. It's better. It looks a bit silly stuck out at the front. We've got all sorts of seed heads and pods, and this is a sedum that was growing out of the wall. Sedums are very good because they've got fairly stiff stems as a rule, being something that will dry out. They have to have a fairly stiff stem if they're in a dry position. So they're very good. We've got a bit of ling. It's the first parts of the summer heather just beginning to show. This is the ling type, which is out before the main heather. We've got some herbs. We've got the marguerite. Now, if you're going to plant bedding plants, I would suggest that a marguerite will be really good because it grows all summer, and the more you cut, the more flowers that you get. It's very good, and it's nice and bright in the garden being white. Well, we've eaten the sorrel in the spring, and now we've got the seed heads. So it's very good for making dainty pieces with this because it's very similar to the dock. This is the dock seed head. It's a bit thicker though. I prefer the sorrel in actual fact. This is a bit heavy. You do have to catch it when it's fairly green, otherwise all these little bits shed off. And if you're drying it, do be careful that you don't put all these bits out on the garden afterwards, especially the dock, or you'll have a great forest of dock where you don't want it. Grasses, they're always nice at the moment, and if you're drying you want to have caught them before they get fully open like this one is. There's some nice green grass and this pollinated, this one here, which I'm going to put in the arrangement in a minute. Right, I'm going to start off with some parsley. The parsley isn't supposed to go to seed, but mine has, so I've just whipped the tops off quickly. It also has a lovely smell, so this arrangement's going to smell nice as well. The lime, push the lime in down here, and a piece out the back so it sort of marries the two pieces together. Right, we've got some broom pods that haven't gone brown yet. The broom is lovely earlier on in the season. We've just missed it, unfortunately. But the broom itself can be used all the year round. These lovely seed pods at the moment will dangle out nicely. It's quite funny, in the late summer, if you're sitting near your broom bush, you'll hear the pods popping with a little crack every time one of them pops open and the seeds spring out. And it's amazing how far away they actually get sprinkled with a good device like that. You seem to get broom bushes coming up miles away from the parent plant then. Right, what am I going to use in here? A bit of grass, I think. This was a grass I spotted growing in the car park when I parked up the car the other day, and I thought, whoa, that looks interesting. I'll have a chomp at that when I'm ready to do this tape. You obviously need a bit of colour. The honeysuckle got caught in all the wet weather we've just had in the last couple of days, and all the fronds from the honeysuckle have dropped off, which I wanted to use in this. but the sedum seems to have survived quite well. Get a bit of foliage in here, otherwise it's going to be difficult to cover up. Just cutting off the seed heads of the wild geranium because I wanted the big leaf bit to go in the middle there. This is like the outdoor maidenhair fern. It's really old-fashioned plant, and apparently they used to use it in buttonholes years ago, this type of fern, before the asparagus fern of nowadays has taken over. It was a plant I'd brought from my mother's garden, but it is susceptible to green fly, so I have to watch it, otherwise I come to use it and all the fronds have smothered a bit. So the only trouble with the summer flower arranging is that you do tend to get the green fly settling on things. So do make sure before you bring them in the house you've got rid of it, otherwise your house plants might catch the green fly at a later date. The other type of campanula is the trailing one, which is this blue one. We had the taller one earlier on. This is the rockery one. To my great annoyance, it don't come down over my wall, it goes up and joins the other plants that are above it, which is really annoying. But it has very good stiff stems, and these type of plants are the things that people don't always think of picking, but they last really quite well, and it's a shame really to leave them. You might as well have them in the house where you can sort of see them every day. These are the cut off from the delphinium we used earlier on. 3 of the heads. As I said earlier on, it's always in 3s or 5s, usually the flower arranging amounts. Let's put this through here. That's better. Trying to bring a bit of colour in. It's a handy shape. This bit was growing over something, so I picked it so that the bits would actually trail nicely. If you look at a plant when you pick it and you have an idea where you actually want something to go when you arrange it, try and pick the bits so that the flowers are actually going to be able to go the way you want them to. So it's no good trying to get this bit to go in the direction that the flowers aren't sort of naturally laying, otherwise it doesn't look natural. It looks as though you've had a problem with it. It's a nice geranium leaf for the centre here. When you cut the geranium flowers, the leaves in actual fact are almost as valuable as the flowers are, because they're a very good shape for filling in if you're stuck for an in-filler. This is oregano. It's a very nice smelly herb. This is the yellowy type, and we use it in cooking a lot. So I like to keep the new shoots going, so when it starts to flower I usually have those off and put them in arrangements. So that bit's coming to join that colour over there. Oh, the green fly flown off. That. Whoops. It's amazing how much you can actually fit into a very small block of Oasis or foam when you actually come down to using little pieces. These I've saved specially for drying. These are the Aquilegia seed pods. In the spring, late spring, you get the beautiful Aquilegia flowers, or the granny's bonnets, which is the old-fashioned name for them. And now we have the green, and then they'll go nice and brown as the autumn comes on, and then they'll shed their seeds, a bit like the poppies. Again, if you're hanging them up to dry, put something underneath to catch the seeds so you can replant them. Whoops, can that off? Come off. Just fill in this back bit. Managed to bend the stem so it won't go in anyway. Let's try that. These are the vinca or periwinkle leaves. Again, it's a rockery plant, but if you've kept it fairly well cut back, the new growth is usually quite good for doing arrangements. It's good and stiff, and you do have a little blue flower occasionally, although the little flower doesn't stay on very well when you've actually cut the stem. It's so fine it tends to get damaged or drops off fairly quickly. So just use it as a green plant if you have a problem with that. Some Aquilegia leaves. Now then, have I got any major gaps, I ask myself. I was going to use the little heads of the Marguerite just to lighten this corner. Yellows and whites go beautifully together. Now then, have I got any gaps or have I not got any gaps? Let me just turn it around so I can have a look. Not too any major ones, I don't think. Just put a little bit of gyp coming out at the front. The gyp is only just beginning to come out, unfortunately, so this is fairly tight. I always have problems getting this to keep from year to year. It doesn't seem to like to come up again the following year. Some people have no problem whatsoever, but mine always seems to have died a death in the winter, so I have to plant it again every spring for it to come up in the summer. There are two different types. There's a very soft one, which is the one that you'll buy as a seed, and then there's this one which you buy as a root, which is the one that you would expect from your florist. There we go. Lovely. Lots of little bits from your rockery. This little sack is in actual fact quite hard. It's been starched. It's the material that's been starched. We actually bought it, and I've put a piece of foam in the top here. This could be used for dried, really. I don't think this is going to take too kindly to the wet, and also I can't fill it up with water, obviously, because it would come through the material. So this is literally for the evening or for the day that you want it. The flowers will last okay in the oasis until they've actually drank it up, any of the water that's in there. So I'm just going to use very quickly a bit of gyp, some sweet peas, and just a bit of greenery to give it a bit of depth. So there's a piece of variegated ivy. Let me just get the sweet pea. These are so much my favourite flower. The scent is absolutely wonderful, and they're so beautiful in brides' bouquets. We use them as much as we can until the season finishes. So this is just a tribute to the sweet pea, really. This is the Alchmelia mollis. This is one of the very old herbs, and there's all sorts of things that you can do with this herb-wise. But it also would be equivalent to the Gypsophila if you haven't got any. Then use the Alchemilla mollis. It's very easy to grow, especially if you've got a fairly shady part of the garden. Don't forget, although I'm cutting the sweet peas down, the shorter they are, the better they will actually last. So don't be frightened to cut flowers down. Think that you're actually doing them a favour. So they haven't got to struggle to get too much water up their long stems. Just turn that round. Put in the centre here. Here we go, just to take this one out. It's a bit sticking out a bit at an angle. It looks too false. Let's just push it in a bit further. It's better. And a few of the summer grasses just to drift through it in a lovely lazy fashion. Whoops. Trouble is with grasses, they get all tangled up. But as they come for free, and if you have had a problem with the lawnmower, like we've had a problem with our lawnmower this year, and the grass has gone into like a natural field, we have most wonderful grass heads come up and a forest of dandelions that was all yellow. Looked very pretty. Now we've got the lawnmower fixed, we're back down to a recognisable lawn. There we go, a quick summer posy. This is quite a neat wreath ring, really. What's happened is that the bark from the silver birch tree has been stripped off and it's been pinned to a dry foam wreath ring. It would be quite easy to do, especially if you're near a wood and somebody's actually cutting silver birch down and you have access to your bark. Obviously, if it's a growing tree, you're not going to strip all the bark off it, although sometimes you do get the trees that shed in the late autumn this type of bark off, and you can peel a bit of it off. But don't peel it all off, otherwise the tree will die. But these will be commercially available for a little while. That's the only trouble with the floristry stuff at the moment, is that you get phases for things. This is in this year, it probably might not be in another year or a couple of years' time. But it's a good idea, and it's something that you could make yourself from garden things, which is why I thought it was a good idea. I've stuck a block of foam on here with just the pot tape, which is waterproof, and it's stuck quite firmly to the bark and to the back here where I've just taped it over itself. You could glue gun it on if you wanted to, especially if you were just doing a dried arrangement on something like this. But I'm going to use it so that it'll either go, you could either hang it on a wall or you can use it as a table centre. Right, get the foliage in first. I'm going to use the fern as a start. I don't want it too big, so I'll have it to there. We've experimented with bracken. The actual bracken itself is not very good for flowers. It soon droops. But the single frond fern is much better. It doesn't droop as quickly, and especially if it's got over its spring bit where it's very fine and new. A lot of the foliage in the gardens when it's new won't actually last very well. It droops when you actually cut it, so you have to wait for it to harden off the late spring and early summer. This is the ever useful Hebe. Which is just coming into flower. It has these fronds of white flowers that come out all over the bush and makes it looking as though it's covered in snow. You get different colours. You've got pink one and a blue one and this little white one. This is useful for us because we use it a lot for weddings as an infill, because it has a very pretty flower then, and it's greenery at the same time. Also, it lasts very well. I've got to find something to cover my piece of green tape up there, which wasn't very clever of me. I've left that bit. Let's try this. This is the variegated mint. I'm not exactly sure I like the smell of this too much. But it's the same family as this, which is catmint. Catmint is a wonderful border plant for making sort of a hedging, well, not a hedge as such, but a good binding for your borders. But it does have this unfortunate smell, and I think the cats like to roll in it. It is a herb actually, but I must say it has a pretty potent smell. But it's very useful for flower arranging because you can use it in between the joints as you can the dead nettle, which it looks very similar to. The dead nettles, the white ones, and you can get the rockery type, which are you can get a pink variegated and a yellow one as well. So the variegated nettles are very good plants to plant as well. Obviously they don't sting, so that's a help. These quite often have a nice droopy appearance for being able to trail over things. They'll be coming on like that. Hopefully you won't be able to see the green tape when we've finished. We're just filling in at the front here. Well, my front and your back now. Ageratum, that's your summer bedding plant, which is just getting a good spike of flower up. If you take out the centre flower, then your plant will bush and you'll have some more flowers later on in the season. It is a flower that you can actually buy from your florist in the summertime. If they have a Dutch wholesaler, they usually bring ageratum in on great long stems, as they do the snapdragons and the stock and other summer plants. Another one of my favourite smells is lavender. This is a dark lavender. You can get them in pinks now, as well as the mauve shades. But I think this is such a wonderful smell, and it's fresh and summery and goes well with sweet peas and strawberries and things like that. And of course you can use the heads of the lavender. You can use, if you're craft minded, you can wind the ribbon round the top and bend them over and make your old-fashioned lovely smelly lavender bags. Doesn't dry all that well, although if you catch it early before these little flowerlets open, if you leave it too late, they tend to shed off a bit and you'll get a shower of them on the floor, but it still smells wonderful. I think the Marguerite, because it looks like a wild daisy, it's really pretty. If you're in the season when you have your cow parsley out on the verges, that is very good for lasting, and because it grows like a weed everywhere in the late spring, it's a very good supplement for things like Gypsophila, or for making a nice light airy look, whoops, to the arrangement. It's the same family, this umbilica family of the parsley, and all these have the same shape of flower. They have the white head, and this has a sort of greeny yellow. Oops, no, it doesn't go there. Strip it over the top. It's got a heavy head on that one. Put it down there. There we are. Put that on one side. Has a slightly wild woodland look with your bark. And you could hang that on the wall. You have to make sure that it stopped dripping, because once you tip it upright, it will have a tendency to drip for a few minutes. Or you could use it as a table centre. You could bring it round this way if you wanted to, but I like the silvery look of the bark, and I don't really want to cover it up too much. Just gives you an idea. Maybe you can bind it round with honeysuckle or something like that if you wanted to make a ring. Anything to make a ring that you can put the flowers on at one point. This little pot is for potpourri, for your nice smelly flower petals. It has the holes in the top of the lid, which can be used later on for that kind of thing in the winter time. I want to use it now because I love the strawberries on the front there, and it has a beautiful lid. I'm just going to put the lid into there like that because it's worth showing. It's got such a good pattern on the top, and the strawberries are lovely. And I've been outside and I've found some actual strawberries growing, ones that I hadn't managed to find when we picked them the other day. These are the pink strawberries. I've never seen pink strawberries before. Well, pink flowered, I should say. The strawberries are still red, but the flowers are a beautiful bright pink, and they actually make a very good border plant because of that. Just wedge this geranium leaf underneath there. I can still see the strawberries on this side, but it makes a background for them to hang down on there. So I was really chuffed. The strawberries are like a cross between a wild strawberry and a commercial strawberry, so they have I think, a better taste. They actually taste like a really strong, warm, scented strawberry. And the flowers are pretty anyway. This is another one of our quickies. Trying to pick up the colours here. This is Euphorbia, the bush variety. Now, all Euphorbias bleed. It's the same family as the poinsettia, and on the poppies, they all have this white sap which bleeds when you cut them. Now, I happen to be allergic to it, so I tend to come up in spots if I've actually got this juice over me. So if you've had a problem with it and you've picked Euphorbia at any time and come out in a rash, then it could possibly be the juice that you've got over yourself. You could put a match to it when you cut it, just to stop it from flowing out. That's what you need to do with poppies. If you cut poppies, they are quite good lasters, but you do need to just light a match or a lighter at the end as you cut it and seal it off. Don't recut it once you've actually sealed it in that way, it will actually take up water through the stem, but it will stop it drooping or shedding its petals for a few days. The Icelandic poppies are very good for that, for just cutting as a cut flower, and they look just pretty even in a jam jar if you haven't got anything else to put them in. I've cut the sweet peas down, as you saw, in between the bracts. In between the flowers you have quite a long piece of stem, and if you can cut in between these joints, leave this flower head on this piece, the longer one, then you've still got that bit for these two, which is very good for small arrangements. And the pot's got the daisies on it, so I'm using the Marguerite. If you happen to live in the Chiltern area, or you're near the verges that have the Marguerites on, the white daisies on in the summer, you'll be knowing what I'm talking about. These are the garden variety, the ones that have been grown for the gardens rather than the wild one, which is a bit bigger than this. They call them dog daisies, you might know them by that name, though I'm never quite sure why a dog daisy. This is a nice shape for going on a table where you've got people sitting all around it. So I'm just putting the seed pods of the Aquilegia and little bits on this back side of it. And I have some just opening Spirea. This is the one with the yellowy leaf, but it has the lovely pinky flowers that are just beginning to come out. And it picks up the strawberry colour from the pot. My sorrel is a bit of a peculiar shape, so I can't use that, although it had the pink bit in it. Let's see what the front looks like with the strawberries. There we are. These are all simple arrangements. I'm trying not to make them too complicated for you, because garden flower arranging really just wants to be the little bits put into a pot, and you've got to enjoy doing it. So if you're not going to get in a state thinking, oh goodness, I can't do it, then it takes half the fun out of trying if you have a panic before you start. It's really just to give you ideas, so that if you've got anything that's round, a teapot would do for this kind of thing, and you can use your lid at the front there. And, oh, I know what you could do. If it's a nice summer day and you want to go outside, then you could use as a prop a parasol. Baskets come in all sorts of different shapes and sizes, and the other day when I was down at the wholesalers, I thought that this was rather a good shape. It's the handbag. They came in threes, and this is the largest one, but I thought it looks really cute and it's ideal for summer arranging, or summer and autumn arranging really. For a change of colour, we're going to do yellows. Now this colour tends to not be so prevalent in the summer. If you notice, flowers do tend to actually grow in colours. You get the yellow daffodils and things in the spring, and then the colours change, and you get the blues, and then they go through the white period, and the pinks in the summer, and the whites. And now we're into, I've sort of scraped about and found some of the yellows. We've got the yellow berberis, which is the prickly one. push that in there. And the oasis that I've put in here, this, in actual fact, if you can see, has like a bamboo tube bit in here, and I've wedged the oasis. I put some broken bits at the bottom, and then I've just put this large chunk at the top, so I haven't wasted the great long piece of it. And it's a handy way of getting rid of all your offcuts at the bottom, because it's not going to take anything stem-wise. So, whoops, push that in there, trying to avoid getting spiked on the prickly bits. That's the dangly bits. Now then, what am I going to use as my back? I've got some yellow irises here. Whoops, these are the ones that have not gone quite to seed. This one's gone over, but there's another flower bud in here. Sometimes the irises actually have 2 or 3 flowers coming on behind, so if you think it's finished, you have to make just a feel inside to see if there's another one coming on. Let's cut that off. I have to remember that this won't actually last too long, this flower, so it's something that you might have to take out when the other things carry on going. This is an interesting chrysanthemum. It's feverfew, and if you suffer from migraines and headaches, then this is the herb that they reckon will help you. In the meanwhile, it makes a very pretty summer plant. It also spreads quite well, so if you've got a patch that you want to sort of look wild, then this is a good plant because it self-sets and it's quite pretty as well. Taking off these leaves because I want it to, don't want to hide the basket too much. And it's been underneath a sycamore tree and it's drip bits all over it, so it's got black splodges on the leaves. Oops, I like Alchemilla because it's so fine, but it's a good colour for going with just about anything. Trying to give you ideas of different things that you might have in the garden. These are snapdragons, just pulled off the little seeds that are at the bottom. It's quite a good idea to cut them anyway because they will produce some more flowers once you've cut off the first main stem anyway, so it's good. And you don't have to take them out, they'll come up year after year if you're clever. Even like wallflowers, they'll come up again quite often. These are the bedding tegates, or the marigolds. Any of the marigolds, if you can get over the smell, are very good. They last very well in water. And the remains of the Allicin, the yellow Allicin that grows over your rockeries. And if you look at things like Albrecia and Allicin and Saxifrage, you'll find that they've all got good stems if you actually cut the larger of the flower heads. And you can use them quite well in your arrangements. This is the Bobbly Buddleia. I always think this is lovely. It looks like a little load of honeycombs all stuck in a ball on the end. It also has a beautiful smell and it's environmental friendly because the butterflies absolutely adore it. And the whole of your garden where this is will be buzzing with bees, all busy at the Buddleia bits. This is one of the first of the Buddleias, and I had to rook around underneath the bush to find these because the mauve ones are just coming out now, but ours aren't quite out enough to cut as yet. Being north, we're fairly backward in things like that. This is the other type of euphorbia, the one that you can grow in your flower beds. It doesn't get much above 12 inches. And again, don't forget it bleeds, so it does need a bit of careful handling. But it suits this type because you've got a little bit of orange on the top. This is a fantastic garden plant. It's Aruncus or goat's beard, but it's really very similar to Spirea. To my way of thinking, it looks pretty similar once you've got it cut. But this forms a massive great bush, very all decorative, I would say. If you've got a patch in the garden, you want something to really show up as something that looks really different, and this is a good plant. Even with like a pampas grass, it would go quite well with pampas in the middle of a lawn. We find we get a sort of little caterpillar thing on ours, so we have to spray quite early on in the season, otherwise the little caterpillar things have nicked all the leaves and the plant doesn't look very happy. But it's like the Spirea, it has these lovely sort of fronds, and they lend themselves to drooping out. There we are. I think that's just about all I can get in. It's not a very easy container as such because it's such a long way in here that you have to have a potluck as to whether you reach the oasis in the middle. I love my bits of grassy, so I'm just going to pop. Oops, totally missed the oasis. Dangling out of there. I don't know if I like that in there very much to take that out. Have I got a big gap or not? I'll put a sedum, I think. Didn't think that looked right. I think I'll have a bit of sedum in the middle. It's not quite such a fluffy look. There we go. This is a front-facing basket, so you could do a flat one or this type of shape. This one you can obviously don't need anything at the back here. This magazine rack I think will make quite an unusual ending for our flowers from the garden video. It's good because you can use these pieces in here and it's fairly tall. Now the usual heights on flower arranging is 2.5 times the height of the container, which isn't going to be too good because I'll be off the top of the video by then. So I'm not really going up as high as that. So the tallest bits at the back that I'm going to use are foxgloves. I think foxgloves, sweet peas and lavender signify summer. So nothing to do with the weather, which can be grotty. This is going to be our final bit with all the bits in it that I like. I can put in the broom that will dangle out at the bottom. We have an old-fashioned musk rose. Though it doesn't have a very long life, it has the most wonderful scent. And the other one, unfortunately, has got itself squashed, so I can't use it, so I'm just going to use that one. Some dock, some sorrel. I've stripped off the seedy bits of the foxglove, or the digitalis, and these plants that I've cut them from will now sprout out new branches, and hopefully by the end of the summer they will have flowered as well. A lot of people think that they're weeds, but I think they are so pretty. And the great thing is that you never know from year to year what colour they're going to come up, because we didn't have any white ones last year, and this year we've got 5 or 6 white ones come up in with them. and some pale pink ones and some blotchy ones, so they're really good. Oops. This is another type of spirea. Oh, this is going to be good because I'm having a problem reaching the front here. I hadn't thought of that. Bit of eucalyptus for the back. I might have to turn this round because I don't know if I can reach all the front of here. That's the spirea. Now then, this is the other type, the flatter version with a slightly yellowier leaf. I think this arrangement would look okie doke in, say, a fireplace, or somewhere where you want a nice big dollop of flowers. Gypsophila. Whoops. To poke it down to see where the oasis is now. Roses are lovely at this time of year too. I haven't picked too many of the hybrid varieties. These ones are, again, fairly old varieties with the multi-heads on them. They have a lovely smell and they climb as well. Ouch. They're also pretty prickly. We have the everlasting flowers, which are just coming out at the moment. This is Rhodanthe, which you'll recognise if you're a dried flower person, that you can get from the wholesalers. They like to open up in the sun. They have a yellow centre. Unfortunately, this one got itself on the ground and it's a bit of a peculiar shape. Not forgetting the sweet peas. And the dianthus, or pinks. This is one of the old-fashioned varieties and it has a beautiful clove smell. It has a darker fleck in the middle with the frilly edge to it. I can't remember what it's called, but it's again a plant that's a perennial and worth planting if you're wanting a flower to cut for arranging. It's the same family, would you believe, as the Sweet William. You don't tend to think of Sweet William as a pink, but it is. Just going to put a bit of the heather in here in this corner. What else have we got? Sweet peas. Whoops, missed the block. Have I got any gaps at the front here? I think pink flowers for summer is just the right combination. Use the deeper flowers for the centre. Just a few of those bits in there. I think that's just about all I can find the room for. A few grasses. those that haven't got themselves bent. Well, I hope you've enjoyed watching this video and looking at the things that we've grown in the garden, and that I'm sure that you'll be able to find somewhere, friends and neighbours. And I just hope that you enjoy doing them. And the main thing is to actually enjoy yourself. There we go. Thank you.